Welcome to PM Express Business Edition. It's a 60.8 billion loss. And I'm talking for the Bank of Ghana, what they posted last year. But how will this impact on its operations going forward? Its mandate and also ensuring that we have financial stability in the market. Will they be able to play their role as a lender of last resort for the government of Ghana, as well as supervising the commercial banks in the country? Well, these are some of the questions running in your minds after the central bank released its financial accounts for last year. Well, I have with me the Director of Research at the Bank of Ghana, Dr. Philip Abrodotu. Doc, thank you so much for your time. And how are you doing? It's been quite an interesting week, some would say.
Yes, we are fine at the Bank of Ghana. Very interesting week.
Yeah.
Yes, we posted our results last Friday. It's generated a lot of attention in the media.
Help me get some understanding here for the layman. I mean, when I talk about profits, when I talk about loss, I look at limited by liability entity. For a Bank of Ghana that is seen as a state institution, where is this whole argument about loss, profit, and all the rest? Help me out, some education in this space.
Well, so we need profits, first and foremost, to run our operations at the Bank of Ghana. And the operations at the Bank of Ghana are very huge, massive operations that we are involved in to ensure that the economy runs well. And also, we need that to deliver on a monetary policy mandate. That mandate is inflation. That mandate requires that we always ensure that there is optimum liquidity in the economy for economic activity so that it doesn't generate inflationary pressures. And in that process, we try to absorb those excess liquidity that we see on the market that can cause economic noise to the fundamentals. Now, that process of withdrawing liquidity from the system costs money. We need to pay interest on these instruments that we take out from the system. It's an expense on our balance sheet item. And therefore, we need income to be doing all these things to ensure stability in the economy. We are a public institutions body, BOG, by the nature of the things we do. It's a public institution policy body. And therefore, we need resources to be able to do that. So basically, that's what we do.
I get it, because my concern was the fact that per your entity, does your regulations and your laws allow you to post profit and loss? Because cast back to 2021, you made some profit as I think 1.2 billion Ghana cedis.
Well, not necessarily 2021, but if you go back all the way through to 2016, 17, I think one of those years, whether it was 2016 or 17, was when we made a loss. No. But since then, we've been making profits every year. The last one was last year. We made about 1.23 billion.
That was 2021, yeah.
Yeah, 2021, yes. Well,
but that was what I was trying to get the understanding about, the fact that where lies this entity regulating the financial space, and even the bit about making profit, the bit about making loss and all the rest, and whether that could also cloud or affect your mandate in promoting financial stability in the space.
Well, but George, if you look at upstairs on our balance sheet on the asset side, we do make income from some activities.
Like fines and all the rest.
Well, like fines, but
trading in gold and all the rest and all those things.
those are part of the story. But we do have reserves offshore with correspondent banks. We have investments in instruments offshore. We are buying U.S. treasuries. We are making income from that side as well. So we do make income, yes, from our activities. And then again, on the downside, we do have liabilities. And at the end of the year, these things do offset each other, and then we end up with either we've made a profit or we've made a loss.
So in the case where you made a profit, does it everything goes to the shareholder being the government?
Well, the law requires that when you make a profit, you need to first distribute these profits. There's a way the distribution is done, and then the rest goes to the government of Ghana.
So in the case where you have made this record loss, what happens? Because that also has an impact on your operations going forward. But just to get the understanding that now that there is a loss, it means that those incomes that should have been distributed, and what happened, there wouldn't be any dividend payment. And those are the first things that will happen because of what has happened to your operation in terms of the loss.
So this time there's a loss.
Yeah.
Do we transfer that loss to somebody?
That could be a question that would be asked to someone.
Yeah, but the law talks only about the profit side. The law is silent on what happens when there's a loss. But when there's a loss, well, the central bank will then have to work to rebuild that loss back. We recall in 2016 or 2017 when we made that loss, we quickly built that loss back. Nobody paid attention because probably,
it was
not as huge as what we are seeing today. So there's been a loss. The question is, we just need to put in place strategies and actionable steps to ensure that we recover this loss. George, on the 25th of July, I think the Bank of England posted a statement, and the Bank of England was saying that government will have to give the Bank of England, that is the government of Ghana, the government of the UK, will have to give the central bank, that is the Bank of England, 150 billion pounds sterling. This was the loss that the Bank of England had made on their books in 2022.
Yeah.
Maybe the laws in UK allows such losses to be transferred
to
government, and maybe
you
that
think
is
the
what
same to be applied here in Ghana.
Oh, I don't want to go there. I'm not too conversant with what the law says. I'm only conversant with the positive side when there's a profit.
But Doc, some would argue that
yes,
aren't we comparing apples and oranges here? In terms of the economy in England, the bank of maybe the Reserve Bank in US and even other markets. Can we even look at our peers? And now that you have posted this loss, Nigeria, Gambia, Ivory Coast, what is the practice there when we try to argue that, listen, other markets like Bank of England and the other developed economies have had this challenge?
Well, but George, the question you need to be asking yourself is, have those countries, our peers, gone through such a humongous domestic debt exchange?
No.
The domestic debt exchange was huge. But George, one thing we knew when the domestic debt exchange was being done was it was potentially taken from people almost about 25 billion Ghana cedis in terms of cash liquidity. This is what the domestic debt exchange was doing to agents in the economy. And maybe that is why we saw all this resistance. It's taking money away from the people. So when you talk about our peers, are they reporting profits? Are they reporting losses? Have they gone through a domestic debt exchange? So each country has its own peculiar economic characteristic. And our characteristic was that this is an economy that was moving, that had debt problems, that had physical challenges, that had to undergo a debt restructuring to secure an IMF program. And this is the result that we had. So a huge domestic debt exchange on the people, and the Bank of Ghana has been part of the domestic debt exchange. What we've done is to act as the last shock absorber for the entire debt exchange. And this is where the last buck stops.
In your normal banking regulations supervising the banks, you often will raise issues about the level of exposure of a bank. Do you think that also the time has come, looking at the loss that you have recorded, the time has come to take a second look at your loss in terms of your exposure to the government of Ghana?
I would have been worried if this level of losses had been persistent or staying on our books for the past 3, 4, 5 years.
Yeah.
Then it's worrying. This is a one-off event that we've seen. It's created a negative equity. We need to build back that negative equity into positive territories.
And some would say it would take quite a long time to build back, and that is why the argument about the never again and what is being done, and also the concerns about the level of exposure, because the Bank of Ghana would raise issues about maybe a George Wiafe bank and their exposure to an individual institution. Can the same be applied to the Bank of Ghana, even though you are a lender of last resort for the government of Ghana, that steps should be taken to limit your exposure to financing of government?
To who?
To government.
Well, but George, in this case, what we see is an exposure that dates back as far back as 1992. So all the instruments and the stocks that we are holding, these are not stocks that have been generated in a single period, but it predates it goes as far back as 1992. Let me give you an example. We had tall bonds sitting on our books. We had bonds that were associated with Telecom Malaysia. Okay, at one point in time, there was a deal with Telecom Malaysia. I think Telecom Malaysia wanted to take over Ghana Telecom.
Yeah.
I think it did, but it got out within a short period of time. We needed to salvage that situation. There were some bonds that were issued to try to get the Malaysians out of Ghana Telecom. Those bonds were in there. And other bonds were also in there over the period. The COVID bond was in there. And then at the end of 2022, we also had to securitize the overdraft facility of almost 38 billion was converted into bonds. So that is the history. These exposures have come about as a result of some legacy transactions that went on. Were we overexposed?
But you overexposed someone else. Yeah. And what that steps should be taken to limit those exposure?
Like?
To ensure that your hands are not bent again. I mean, so that we don't have this huge loss again.
Well, George, I don't think our hands are going to be bent again. Those steps that are put in place will ensure that we get out of this situation quickly. And if you read the governor's forward in our annual report, 4 steps have been outlined. One is trying as much as possible not to lend to government again, which in the IMF program we have locked that in as zero financing because it's part of the problem.
And help me right now before we even expatiate on these 4 measures. As we speak right now, is the Bank of Ghana fully implementing this zero financing?
We are.
That is an assurance.
And why do you ask? We are.
Because the concern is that being a lender of last resort, some are saying that government has bullied the Bank of Ghana to be issuing bonds and papers and financing, and that is why the Bank of Ghana has found itself in this current position.
Well, but George, if we go against that zero financing, it will have implications for the IMF program implementation, and that might create all sorts of problems for us regarding the triggering of other flows associated with the completion of each IMF review. We would have missed that critical target. It will become big news. It could flip into other things as we move along. For the first 7 months of the year, we've respected that zero financing.
And there hasn't even been 1,000 Ghana cedis or even 100 Ghana cedis support to government to balance the books or to meet a liquidity challenge.
No. Absolutely no.
And you're enforcing it to the letter.
We are enforcing it to the
Because
letter.
I'm asking that it could come with some shocks again for the economy, where government needs some amount of money to balance its operations.
We'll still stand our ground. We'll still stand our ground.
And that is being done.
That is being done. Full assurance.
As the bank ensured, if I can use that layman's language, or that built that shock absorber to be bouncing government checks as part of the zero financing?
Well, there's a process. Government does not just drop in these checks, but they go through the Ministry of Finance, they go through Controller and Accountant General. Controller and Accountant General will have to check with Banking Department whether that check for which is being drawn against a certain particular account has the resources. So those background works are done. And if there are no resources, they'll be alerted way before, and the check might not even come. So we've put in adequate measures to ensure that it doesn't happen.
You were explaining to me earlier on about those 4 measures that the governor has put in place to ensure that we don't get back to this position again. And the zero financing was one. What are the other measures that Bank of Ghana, the central bank, is also put in place to ensure that we don't get back to this space again?
Well, I think the other one, you touched on that in the beginning of your opening statements. You talked about profits and what we do with these profits. So these profits are no more going to go to government anymore. These profits are going to use to offset the negative equity that is sitting on our books now. The second one is that we are moving to optimize our investment portfolios, which we have abroad, to make sure we derive the maximum possible income. The third is on the zero financing, which we have just discussed. And then the last one, which is, for me, is also very critical, is to ensure that government gets, that the Bank of Ghana gets recapitalized as we move along. If you look at the statement, the stated minimum capital is 10 million Ghana cedis.
That some would say is peanut for a central bank to be doing all these things as well.
Yeah.
But
it's because we've not. I don't even recollect the last time we got capitalized. So we need a little bit of
fresh.
I mean, George,
just like how you told the commercial bank. But Doc,
George, just like how you have your own business, and once a while you try to inject some life, try to put some money into your personal business to ensure that the business
Doc,
runs.
I'll be coming back to you as we get more clarity on the plan or the structure to recapitalize the bank and also enforcing your mandate despite these current challenges. This is PM Express Business Edition. As we look at the Bank of Ghana's record laws and how that could affect its mandate and also ensuring that there is financial stability. Dr. Philip Abrodotu is the Director of Research at the Bank of Ghana. We'll take a break and we will be right back. Welcome back to PM Express as we look at Bank of Ghana's record profit and how that could affect its mandate or its function of promoting or enhancing financial stability in the banking space. And he is Director of Research at the Bank of Ghana, Dr. Philip Abrodotu. Doc, we're talking about, in your statement, you spoke about 5 years recapitalizing. And it has to be 2 things.
Yeah.
Who is going to take that decision to recapitalize, being the government of Ghana or yourself? Now, help me out with respect to this whole. What are the tentative timelines have you given to yourself that by this X number of dates, we should be able to fill this hole, and that this is what we've done to ensure that there isn't another big hole again?
I think we talk about the medium term.
Yeah.
That is what.
5 years?
5 years, 6 years, 7 years. Yes.
6 years, 7 years,
Yeah,
5 years. So are you looking at
George,
maximum?
Look, the economic situation always evolves. So within the context of a stable, sound macroeconomic environment and putting in place these measures that I outlined to you, the 4 measures, including a potential recapitalization of the Bank of Ghana, we should be getting out of this very quickly. We had that discussion during the IMF talks on the need for a recapitalization of the Bank of Ghana, and those discussions are already underway. The problem is that we need to see through implementation of the current IMF program, which runs for a period of 3 years, by which time government would have created enough space to be able to use some of those space to sort of consider recapitalizing the Bank of Ghana.
So you've gotten to that level or that decision where the bank has to be recapitalized, and that is a
discussion started way back before we published this result.
And as your biggest shareholder, taking that decision that indeed we have to do this?
Talks are still going on. That decision hasn't been taken. Talks are still going on. There's recognition across board that some recapitalization is needed.
Doc, do you think, what do you tell those who are worried and the fact that when this decision has to be taken to recapitalize the bank and it falls on the government of Ghana, government has to look for money within the economy and finance, and some will say that could the Bank of Ghana have taken measures and actions and strategies to minimize the shock? And some were saying that, well, government BOG left itself so exposed that this shock might or will be borne by the taxpayer.
But George, we are even forgetting about the fact that it's the DDEP that has brought about all of this.
But someone says about your exposure as well to the government of Ghana.
It's the DDEP. Everybody was exposed in there. It's the DDEP that has brought about all of this. I mean, if out of the loss of 60.8, 53.1 is as a result of the DDEP, if that had not happened, George, we wouldn't be reporting of a loss of 60. If that had not happened, take that 53 out, it's a loss of 7 billion. So
but do you think that that one is even normal? Even 7 billion loss, some would say it's quite huge, and that could be linked to your operations and how you handle things.
Yeah, so I'm coming. If you look at the other factors as well, we also had exchange rate variations, also contributing some 5 billion. George, the macro economy and the DDEP in which the economy operated in 2022 was the reason. It tells us one thing: we need to pursue policies to always ensure stable macroeconomic conditions, because that is vital.
And are we doing that on the part of the monetary side to ensure that it contributes to the stability?
We are. George, there's an adjustment process taking place right now as we speak. Both the fiscal and monetary authorities are working together to ensure that the adjustment comes through successfully. And that adjustment is being done with the support of the IMF program. We are supposed to see a steady decline in inflation as we move along, which is coming anyway, but it's coming slowly. But if you dissect the numbers carefully also, George, you realize that significant progress has been made towards the fight for inflation. Significant progress in the sense that if you look at the path of non-food from the beginning of the year to June, non-food inflation, where monetary policy impacts the most, has declined by 16%. George, nobody is talking about this, but that decline is very significant. What has clouded the story? George, we've moved non-food inflation from 49.9% to 32%. But George, this is very significant. What is not changing fast enough is what is happening on the food side. And there are so many factors that have been ascribed to why food is behaving
Doc,
the way,
we'll be coming
the
to
way it is.
more details
Yes.
about your inflation targeting policy and the current challenges and all those things. But again, back to inflation. Some have argued that whilst the Bank of Ghana is aggressive on policy tightening as well, certain actions of the Bank of Ghana in terms of lending and all the rest raises a lot of concerns about your policy rate hike. Because again, some are saying that maybe this inflation has been fed, also been influenced by your lending to government.
I say that again.
As in the fact that your lending to government through various instruments has fed some money into the system and contributed to, in our layman, when we're in primary school and all that,
too much money
in the system chasing
too much money,
goods,
and
you might have contributed that to the Bank of Ghana.
Well, George, I don't think anybody is running away from that fact. That created part of the inflation problem, but that is easing and that is getting off very fast. Through the zero financing, it's getting off very fast, and that is why we are beginning to see inflation ease on the non-food side very quickly. And it's good news, George. It's good news.
The bank is quite optimistic on the zero financing thing and how it will impact in this whole inflation dynamics.
No, because it does. It does. I mean, George, it's high-powered money. An injection of high-powered money, you just define it the textbook way. It causes some amount of inflation. So yes, we stopped it. George, in 2017, check the records. In 2017, 2018, 2019, there was zero financing of the budget. Where did inflation drop? Inflation went as low as 7.6% or 7.8%. Inflation did drop that low. Then comes COVID, and then all these things begin to accelerate. Then comes COVID.
I want this.
So George, yes, we've gotten away from financing the budget, and it will help very significantly.
Recently, there was a reportage in Reuters, and I want some clarity about government writing off some 77 billion Ghana cedis in terms of debt. That means that you did lend that amount of money to government for last year, right?
It wasn't last year alone. George, these are stock numbers.
That is the 77 billion, right?
Yes, and this is what I was explaining to you, that there's a legacy issue associated with the stock of bonds that the Bank of Ghana is holding. I just told you that there are two types of instruments that the Bank of Ghana holds. We have the marketable and non-marketable instruments. The stock of the marketable instruments that went through the domestic debt exchange exercise, the stock was 64.5 billion Ghana cedis. We were holding bonds worth that much. That stock had a haircut of 50%. I don't know where Reuters got that 77 from, and I don't know what they were adding up to the entire numbers. But if you have a stock of 64.5 and half of it is shaved off for you, in addition to a new interest rate and then another tenor, the IFRS will tell you that, look, bringing these new instruments back into your balance sheet will require further adjustment, and you need to look at it in terms of fair market valuation. So all these things are going on. Reuters is talking about 77. Well, the figure that we have for the...
What figure does the Bank of Ghana?
No, the figure for the non-marketable alone was 64.5 billion. And then we have the marketable instruments. And then again, we have lending that we did to Cocoa Board.
For the layman on the street, help me out. And this has come up before. And just walk me through. In terms of this lending, was it for last year or running from 2021 to 2022? Did the Bank of Ghana print money, fresh currency, to lend to the government of Ghana?
George, if you look at the operations of the central bank, we don't go about printing money especially for a specific cause. We don't do that. That printing of money, I think it's a...
help me on that, so I'm saying to the layman on the street, to the Ajo Mansa who sells a Mantuman Kibi. How do we get this explanation to her that the financing was not necessarily about printing of 200 Ghana cedi notes, 100 Ghana cedis notes, and governments of Ghana, Ministry of Finance, come and take and go?
The central bank has a lot of resources, and that is what was used for that purpose. So resources available to the central bank, funds flowing in and out, and that was used in providing the financing to government. I wouldn't like to use the word printing of money.
So that didn't happen?
That didn't happen.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Because the argument being put on this was that Bank of Ghana printed notes and gave it to government. And that is also feeding into the inflation.
So what, we printed 37.9 billion and then we gave it to government.
Did that happen?
Specifically.
Did that happen?
George, this is a resourceful institution.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because I'm saying that fed into the inflation and all the plenty money chasing.
No, but George, see, when high-powered money is used for that purpose, I just explained a short while ago, it causes inflation. So some fair amount of inflation did come through, but we are unwinding, and we are unwinding very quickly.
I'll come back again to the inflation target, but let's look at your accounts issue and deeper, the bit about the motor vehicles maintenance, and you saw the huge leap, about 100% to that 100, and some are saying that is the Bank of Ghana moving MOABs across the regions to other in cutting monies and maybe a customized V8 for the directors and all the officials? The amount is huge for a year.
George, it's huge for a year because we are moving from 60 billion to 120 something or 110.
I mean, that's not small money.
George, it's huge, but you must ask yourself, what were the conditions under which the central bank was operating? I think first and foremost, I want to disabuse the notion that caption vehicle maintenance embodies a lot of line items.
Right.
Like we have fuel expenses in there, okay? And then we have all the fleet of vehicles that we have. They constantly undergo some insurance. At the end of the year, we pay some insurance on these vehicles. And then there are also licensing fees. Those are very small, I must admit. The biggest item in there is fuel. But this is not fuel that is being given to directors of the bank. No. George, in 2022, look at where we started the year off as far as crude oil was concerned. Crude oil was around 70. In the course of 2022, it skyrocketed to almost 120 US dollars. And then finally, it eased off at the end of the year at around 101 US dollars. Moving from 70 to 101 by the end of the year, and looking at how this fed through domestic export prices. What it meant basically was that given our scale of operations and how fuel intensive our operations are, then that item on the balance sheet needed to move up significantly, and that is what is being picked up. It's basically a fuel item. But George, then the second question that comes up is, what do we do as a central bank to warrant the significant increase in fuel? George, our currency department is involved in massive currency movements, specie movements all over the country throughout the course of the year. They need to send monies when the banks call in and the banks are saying that we are short of currency here, short of currency there. They do move. Supervision department, they do a lot of inspection. The bank branches, they visit them in a year. They do visit the banks and their branches. At least the law requires that they do that once for each bank in a year. That involves a lot of money. So George, if you look at our operations, and not only banking supervision, we have other financial institutions department, and they are also involved in supervision. They are also moving around the forex bureaus, checking them, checking their books, doing that. other financial institutions, microfinance, they are located where in the north, in the south. All these things cost money. So that line item we are seeing there is basically a petroleum thing and not directed to directors of the bank, but for our operations.
Doc, there are two issues here. There are some who are saying that looking at the current challenges that we are going through in the economy.
But George, if I may ask you, have you checked your bill, your own personal petrol bill for 2022?
I have not checked
George,
that.
please do.
I'll do that. But
so that next time when we meet with
we'll discuss that.
Yes, please check, and you will see a doubling.
But some would say that,
looking at
the current challenges that we are going through,
yes,
some were expecting some level of cutback in the operations of the Bank of Ghana, and that would have fell back on the numbers. But it appears it was business as usual. Personnel costs, communications, monetary policy. Some of these budget lines shot up by over 100%. There's that question about prudence and being very, very tight with money. And also there's a question about the inflation thing, that it puts more pressure on the Bank of Ghana to stabilize the system.
But George, you've just answered the question. Yeah. It puts more pressure on the Bank of Ghana to stabilize the system. And that is exactly what we did. And doing that cost money. George, doing that cost money. And that is what we are seeing in the numbers. It's a full thing which is driven by petroleum prices. When your petrol moves from 5 to 12 in the course of 2022, and diesel moves from 7, it jumps all the way to like 22 in the course of the year. And look at the number of times we adjusted petroleum prices last year. These were all noise in the system. It impacted on inflation. It impacted on the cost because we buy fuel on the market like any other economic agent.
What about the bit about the being prudent a little bit with your resources during the current space? So for instance, if a car has to move to maybe Pungurugu and all the rest for bank supervision purposes, kind of situation where we put all the guys together, move in a week and all the rest, and that could have scaled back because there's a question about the recapitalization.
Well, George, if I tell you that in 2023 there's been some form of adjustment regarding the pool and how the cars are used in the pool.
Is that being done now?
It's being done now. There's been some adjustment. That is being done now. We are pooling cars for our operations, and at times it's even a little bit difficult. I shouldn't be saying this here.
Just like what the commercial banks had a serious loss for last year, and they are recovering in Q1 and Q2.
You see how fast they are. You see how fast they are recovering.
But Doc, some will say that let's wait for the full year because the profit for half year is a comparison of the half year for last year, which the numbers were good. A full year will give us the bigger exposure to see whether indeed the numbers will look good.
Well, let's wait and let's see what happens.
So you think that you've taken those measures to ensure that, for Q1, for Q2, we'll see these measures impacting on your numbers when you publish?
This is an effective institution. This is an institution that does things right. George, we are aware of all these things. Adjustments are taking place.
Is the Bank of Ghana turning the corner with respect to your account, or you have turned the corner in terms of an improved position for the Q2 or for half year?
George, we are effectively improving our operations.
So it's turning the corner.
Which corner are you talking about?
I'm talking about your numbers, your numbers when it comes to the financials. We don't get a chance to see the Q1s and the
Q2s
from what you've seen.
No, but the results that we would see in 2023, we'll be sitting down here same time in 2023. Hopefully, God willing, we'll see a better outcome in our accounts.
This is PM Express Business Edition as we look at the Bank of Ghana's record loss and how it's going to impact its mandate as the regulator of the financial sector and the banking sector as well. My name is George Wiafe. We'll take a short break. And don't forget that this program is brought to you by Cherry Tree Properties and also Syntex Tank as well. Be back after this break. Welcome back to PM Express Business Edition as we look at the Bank of Ghana's record loss and how has that affected its mandate as the regulator of the banking and financial space, as well as the lender of last resort. In your Q&A, you sought to give us an assurance that we shouldn't worry. But when a commercial bank is having a negative equity, possible solvency and all the rest, and where tomorrow, if we can't get money anywhere to do anything in this country, we run to the Bank of Ghana. There are some who want to take that assurance with a pinch of salt.
George, we've operated the economy for the first 6 months of this year. We've provided all the support we can to the commercial banks in terms of liquidity, assistance in terms of their borrowing on the short-term window, in terms of their placements with us overnight, in terms of the interest that we pay on those placements. Those activities have gone on smoothly for the first 7 months.
Is that not under threat because of your current position as we speak right now?
This current position existed as at the end of December 2022. But that is not to say that negative equity positions are desirable. George, I think the issue right now is that of policy solvency. The question you're asking now is that of policy solvency. And what that basically means to the ordinary man is, despite the negative equity position or the negative loss, can the Bank of Ghana continue to deliver on its mandate of inflation? And can the Bank of Ghana continue to deliver on its financial stability objectives? And the answer is yes.
That's a firm assurance.
George, the answer is yes. George, so then the issues here is one of policy solvency or policy bankruptcy. Are we policy bankrupt or we are policy solvent? I don't think we are policy bankrupt. We've gotten to the stage where everything is so bad that we can't even conduct monetary policy. It's out of the question. We are still policy solvent. We will still continue to fight our inflation mandate and ensure financial stability.
Despite your recent action or the continuous monetary policy rate hike and all the rest, we saw an uptick for the past 2 months as well. You slowed it, you are back again. There are some who still continue to raise questions about this monetary tool and whether it's being used effectively, or you are one bit mopping up the water and pouring a lot of water down on the ground again.
So, George, I thought somewhere along the line I did explain the inflation dynamics, and I'm coming back to it again. The uptick that you saw was purely food-driven. It had nothing to do with monetary policy.
Then we don't need a policy rate hike.
Well, but the thing is that is why the central bank came out with a measured increase in the policy rate. And that is why we saw a 0.5. The thing is, if you don't take care, this small uptick could feed through to non-food prices and create problems for you down the road. So it's very essential that you take steps to act now and forestall any future pressures that will come along the line. And George, in terms of our monetary operations this year, it has been very effective.
What does the data tell you? Is the data giving you that numbers? Because when you engage businesses, when you engage certain actors in the economy, they still think that this tool is not effective because government's operations,
why is it not effective?
And all George, the rest, inflation is going up and all the rest.
Well, but George, in the recent survey that we had of businesses and consumers, they seem happy that
your policy measures are working.
That some stability has returned.
Targeting is working.
That some stability has returned on the exchange rate front. And I think, should this give assurances to business, some businesses were optimistic about the future. Because, George, you are always talking exchange rate on your shows in the morning. It's a key critical indicator. Businesses, we don't share the very insights of all these surveys that we do,
but I think that
we do report the headlines. But businesses are optimistic. I think it is interest rates that have gone up slightly as a result of our policy measures that we've taken in the past, but they will begin to come down. For those who borrow to do their businesses, yes, it's a little bit biting. But when inflation, we are convinced that inflation is firmly on the downward path, we will begin to recoil policies.
Government is projecting 30.1, which I believe that
government is projecting
30.1 end of year in terms of inflation. I stand to be corrected. That is, some would say we are at 40 something. That is still high for an economy like this.
But George,
and whether the monetary tools are working effectively.
But George, look at where we ended the year with an inflation of 54.1. So if government is projecting 30, what government is telling you is that inflation will ease by 24 percentage points in the course of the year. That is significant. George, that kind of inflation is significant. And if that momentum can be sustained throughout next year, which is 2024, we'll get inflation descending quickly, which is all what we are all looking for, George. George, I don't like high interest rates myself, but at times it's the necessary evil. We need to bring it on board to stabilize the system.
You think that your inflation targeting tool is working?
George,
there are some who said that we don't need it. Let's move on to a different system.
Well, but George,
it's working?
When they say inflation targeting, it beats my mind, because if you look at it myopically and you are saying
focus so much on
you're focusing so much on inflation,
even when it comes to the inflation.
But George, you'll be surprised if you sat in that meeting. You'll be surprised there are committee members who are concerned about the real sector of the economy. We just don't look at inflation. So all those who are saying they are only looking at inflation and using the inflation to take a decision are getting it wrong. George, a better name that could have been used for the inflation targeting probably could have been a more organized way. Look, the IT framework, if you understand the inflation IT framework, it's a more organized way of conducting policy. More organized because you've put in place structures to bring more data on the table to help you make decisions. George, when we talk about CIEA in our press releases, we are sending a signal that we look at the real sector of the economy. So we do look at
the real sector.
Yes, and then we are spending resources, George, every day to move out in the country 6 times in a year, preceding HMPC to be doing business and consumer confidence.
That justifies your high cost, right?
Oh, it's part of it, George. It doesn't justify, but these are some of our operations.
There are strong indications that we'll get into the harvest season. You know, it will impact on inflation as well. Will the Bank of Ghana act accordingly when we see inflation dropping?
Judge, we need to see more data from the Statistical Service to
respond when it comes to your policy rate.
Yes. And George, the decisions that are being taken are very, very optimal decisions that are being taken. So trust me, the data is speaking to itself. And when the data is made available and we are convinced that inflation is on a firm downward path, we'll begin to unwind.
We are set for our first review in September under the IMF program. When it comes to the monetary space, how are we faring, preparing for that first review of this fund program?
Well, the key indicators in the monetary space is one of zero financing of the budget, which under the program is supposed to be kept zero. That has been largely respected. The other issue was to keep inflation close to around 42% for June, and that is where actually we are. We are within the inflation target band. And then the other one, which is the most important, under the program envisaged that we would draw down on our reserves. The program was envisaging a drawdown of about $100 million. Contrary to that, we've built $1 billion in reserves for the first half of the year. That puts us in a better position Q1. And I think we are in a better position to go through the first review successfully.
On the monetary side, I think we're doing so
well. On the monetary side, we are doing very fine. And I think the fiscal authorities are also putting in a lot of effort to ensure that we don't trip. Will we trip? I don't think we don't trip. We should be confident.
And we are building enough reserves to help support the currency.
Well, I just told you that in the first 6 months, we built $1 billion in reserves, as opposed to a drawdown. The program envisaged that things were going to get a little bit tighter and that we were going to draw down. But George, we've had some positive benefits from our Gold for Reserves program. The Gold for Reserves has helped. We've added on a little bit more to our reserves coming from that operation. You know, the gold program has two legs. We have the Gold for Reserves and then the Gold for Oil. I'm more concerned about the Gold for Reserves, which helps shore our reserves. And George, in terms of that, we are doing just fine.
So Doc, are you sure that some of these measures that you put in place would ensure that we would not get back to this challenging position again?
No.
Is that a firm assurance coming from you?
Yes, I'm very confident we are on the right path. Inflation will slow down. The fiscal challenges are being worked on. And in the end, the two should work together to deliver a low inflationary environment for us to allow businesses to also resume their economic activity.
Dr. Philip Abrodo, Director of Research, I appreciate your time so much. And I
Thank
know
you
we'll
very
be coming
much.
back again
Thank
to
you.
see whether
Thank you
all
very
these
much.
things that you've done has impacted on the numbers or it has rather moved you into a worse position. This has been PM Express Business Edition, looking at how the Bank of Ghana's operation could have been impacted, or has it been impacted by the current challenging financing position, or they are actually turning the corner, or they've turned the corner. This has been PM Express. My name is George Wiafe. Remember, it was brought to you by Cherry Tree Properties and Syntax Tank. Have a great day.